Well, good morning and welcome to the Non-Static Podcast, where we explore how to keep moving forward when the motivation feels distant. Here, we dive into finding peace and fulfillment in a busy world, discovering how to embrace life's opportunities to live with purpose and joy. I'm John Belke, and this is my business partner and brother and founder of Non-Static, Josh. Dr.
Hi.
Josh, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Hey, I feel like I haven't seen you in since Friday.
Oh, you're right about that.
Yeah, we're recording this on Monday.
On a Monday, for those of you who don't realize.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything interesting happen over the weekend, or just kind of a nice chill weekend?
I went to go see a movie. I went to go watch Captain America.
How
The new
was
Captain
it?
America movie. It's
There was mixed
standard.
reviews.
It's standard Marvel fare. Let's put it
Okay.
that way.
Just kind of getting to be the same old, same old.
Well, I don't know. It's same old, same old. I just I take Marvel movies for what they are, which is a visual spectacle of computer-generated interactions or fight scenes.
Yep.
And I just enjoy it for what it is. I don't put too much thought into it. So-
You don't expect any life-changing situations to come out of it, or any life-changing thoughts?
I don't look to critique it. It does have my all-time favorite actor in it though.
Who?
Harrison Ford.
Oh, he's in it?
He's in it, and he's
Really?
my all-time favorite actor. Yep.
What is he? What position is he? What position?
What position does he play? He plays shortstop.
Shortstop? Okay.
Yeah.
That would make
Well,
a
I'm
lot
not
of
going to
sense.
wreck the movie for you. I'm not going to tell you what he's doing in there.
Yeah. I'll just wait till it comes out
He's
streaming.
the president of the United States in the movie,
Ooh.
but not all is as it seems with the president.
So he's
put it
kind
that
of
way.
reprising his role from Air Force One. Remember that?
That was a
movie?
great movie.
Oh,
I should go back and watch that.
That was like
Actually,
the-
my wife and I, back when we were dating a long time ago, we actually watched that movie. I can still remember the day. We were sitting at her parents' house, obviously, in the back porch watching Air Force One in the middle of summer.
It was
Simpler
good-
times.
it was good stuff, man.
Yeah,
I
super
remember the
times.
first time I watched it. I think that was the first movie our parents let me watch that was like an R-rated movie.
Oh man, it was pretty
Yeah.
intense R-rated movie.
But it was a made-for-TV version, and so
Oh.
and it was on VHS, and so it was pretty heavily edited. But it was so good. I felt like such a big boy when I was watching that. Good
I'm
stuff,
sure you
though.
did. It was a good movie.
It was
a
really
movie. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
So today you sent me the draft for the notes today. I thought it was pretty interesting. The ghosts in the machine.
Yeah. Yep. Ghost in the Machine.
Definitely caught my eye.
Yeah, so before we go into it, like the general theme, excuse me, I was really focusing on how old habits, and past decisions continue to shape the present. And that can be true whether it's in technology, which is what I'll talk about in a second here. Not that I'm a tech guy, but I think it kind of sets the stage a little bit.
Yeah.
But mainly I want to kind of translate that to how it works in our personal life. But have you ever gone down like the technology urban legend rabbit hole ever?
I've gone down through so many YouTube rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But technology, I don't think I have.
You should sometime, because there's a whole just tons of urban legends when it comes to technology. And the reason is because technology is really focused around like coding and stuff. A lot of the
Right.
technology we have is based on coding.
Zeros and ones.
And what's interesting is some of that coding goes way back, and there's still remnants of old code from way back in the day in current machines now.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'll just bring up one urban legend. So have you ever heard of the urban legend of Polybius?
I have never even heard of that name.
Okay, so first of all, I have no idea if this is true or not, but it's a well-known urban legend in the tech circles. And again, some tech guy is going to kind of come down on me for not giving the whole story correctly. But anyway, legend had it that, do you remember the arcades of the 80s
Oh my
or
gosh,
90s?
they're
were
the best.
Oh, they were wonderful. I can still
I
remember.
miss those.
I do too.
Circus.
Kind of
Circus.
the dim room with all the arcade consoles.
Oh,
yeah, that
and
was the day.
the neon lights and stuff,
Yep.
or the UV lights to
Yep.
make it super cool with the designs on the
Yep.
floor.
That was
oh
the
my
day.
gosh, I miss those days. Nostalgia.
But anyway, the urban legend is, and again, it's an urban legend, no way to verify if it's true or not, but in 1981, this strange arcade cabinet reportedly appeared in Portland, Oregon, and the title of the arcade game was Polybius.
I've heard of that.
Okay.
I've heard
And-
of the story. I didn't know that's what it was called.
Yep. And so, unlike other games at the time, what would happen apparently is that players who played the game would report feeling uneasy after playing. So things like nausea, hallucinations, or even nightmares, for example. So pretty dramatic stuff. But then it got more interesting. And again, I'm paraphrasing the whole story of this, but some people claim to have seen men in black suits come and check on the machine, tweaking some of its code, and then logging the effects it would have on players. Okay? And then all of a sudden, so this game was there for a while, and then all of a sudden it just vanished. It was just gone. It disappeared.
It was
Without a
psyops.
trace. Yeah, it just disappeared. But the other part of the story that's interesting is that the part that truly haunts developers is the supposed, what they call the residual presence of Polybius in modern code databases. So according to legend, pieces of the game's bizarre and disturbing programming were copied, repurposed, or leaked into other software over the years, especially in early gaming development. So that's
crazy.
That's the legend. Again, I'm kind of reading the paraphrase of the story here, but
What was the game about?
I don't even remember. I don't really know what the game was actually about. Probably some space shooter or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when was this?
This was in the early 80s. And
Okay.
again, there's no proof to the story, but it's one of these urban legends that just kind of lived on for ever since then. But the way it kind of resonates, I think, with programmers now, I'm talking out of my league a little bit here, is that this idea of haunted code. And what that concept is that many programmers have said that they've encountered inexplicable bugs and lingering self-replicating errors similar to what Polybius was causing. Okay?
Interesting.
And so the idea is that a lot of these code databases are often built on top of past work, and sometimes entire sections of code is copied and pasted from forgotten origins. So my point is, some of this code kind of lives on from generation to generation. What is said and what they think happened with Polybius, if it's even true, is that they were copying these large blocks of code from an older software or machine or whatever and carrying it forward. And so the urban legend is that some of this computer code is still living in our systems today. So Polybius could still be there.
Well, I don't doubt that at all, because we are just starting with the AI revolution right now.
Yeah.
And there have already been warnings about what do they say? Call it like the AI singularity, or whatever,
yeah.
like where it truly becomes like self-aware.
Yeah.
And it's like all AI is doing is just regurgitating what we tell it to. But
yeah.
I mean, there is, I don't know, maybe something like Terminator or something, or like maybe
Skynet.
Maybe Skynet is real or could be.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into too deep
Yeah.
into that, but maybe I don't know. That's crazy. It's really cool.
So the whole idea of like this ghost in the machine, or ghost code, or some people call it haunted code, is the concept that something that was done a long time ago, that was created a long time ago, is then carried over into the present. And so the idea is that whoever coded Polybius, whether, again, I have no way of knowing if it's true or not. It's just an interesting urban legend. I think what the urban legend is trying to do is identify that, hey, some of this stuff is carrying over from the past. Okay? So the question then is, could an ancient abandoned fragment of Polybius be lurking in the depths of modern games, is what the story online said. Ooh.
The shadow knows.
But so let's just kind of think about that for a minute. If, it's not uncommon, at least I don't, to my expert knowledge, which is severely lacking with coding, is when I've talked to some coders, they say that, a lot of coding is copying over previous code and carrying it forward and working with it and editing it.
Because why recreate the wheel if it's already been created? If you've already had coding to create a stick figure that walks around or whatever for a game, why start over why start over?
Yeah, and coding is incredibly fascinating to me because I have no concept of how to do it.
Have you taken a coding class?
I never have.
I took a coding class a coding class in college. It was fascinating, but it was so infuriating for me because I'm so used to clicking in. Well, this is like way back. This is way before click and drag stuff
Yep.
to like you can get with Wix or Squarespace or wherever these, to build your own website.
Yeah.
You'd actually have to code to
Yeah.
create a website. And the website I created was just garbage.
Yeah.
It was like a green screen with like a couple of pictures on it. It took me weeks to do it.
Yeah.
It was hard work.
Yeah. And so the concept,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's hard work, and so why reinvent the wheel, right?
Right.
And so this idea of ghost code is saying that, well, okay, so let's take your MacBook, for example, which you're recording this on, or a Windows computer, doesn't matter. There is some code fragments in there that are from generations ago, as far as the Mac goes, for example.
Need me some Windows
Because
95
they've
again.
carried it over, right?
Right.
Because it's just easier to do that. Well, and again, I'm out of my league here, but the idea, and I did some research for this, is that some people think that the bugs or the glitches that we have in software are really the result of bad code that's been carried over in some cases over time, right? It's kind of dramatic, but the point is
Polybius
that
is still around.
yeah, so computers have ghosts in this code, but you know what? We also have ghosts in our own lives, right?
Yeah, we do.
And that is these ghosts from our past, linger in our lives and are in our culture sometimes, shaping the present, even when we don't realize that they are. And so the whole idea about bringing the ghost in the machine is kind of thinking about how does our past impact the present, even when we don't actively realize it. Just like there could be some bad code in your computer that's impacting a glitch currently that we don't know what the code is that's causing it. We're not actively aware of it. All we see is the product or the end result, which is my computer is freezing up, or the blue screen of death that Windows users are sometimes used to, or just another glitch in a software
Right.
or a computer game.
Right.
And so it's important to kind of think of how our personal ghosts, for example, are playing a role in our present everyday lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I suppose when you're talking about it that way, ghosts can be either good or bad.
Well, sure.
Or I guess you could say probably ghosts can be kind of a neutral thing. It's just kind of how you perceive your events that happened in your past, even if
Right.
I've had plenty of negative things happen health-wise and
Yep.
and otherwise, and people could look at those ghosts as a like a really negative thing,
Right.
but you could also turn around and turn it into a positive, which is what I try to do.
Yep. And it's like we've talked about before, is we're all products of, to a degree, we're all products of our past experiences, whether good or bad.
Right.
All those experiences go together and kind of create who we are right now and what our perspective is in life in general. But in the mental health world, we kind of call those things like psychological echoes, so to speak. And that's kind of like old habits that we've had growing up, childhood experiences, whether good or bad. And again, I'm not saying that, like you said, to your point, our own psychological echoes, our own personal ghosts aren't necessarily bad. They're just there, and they kind of accompany us. When you think about the concept of a ghost, certainly we like to make them scary and whatnot around Halloween or whatnot. But really the idea of a ghost is something that's there, that's lingering, that we don't necessarily see, but it impacts the environment.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we a lot of times, because we don't quite understand it, or because it's unseen, we kind of interpret it to be a scary thing, but not necessarily. But it's important to think about how, our childhood experiences or even our past failures impact how we make current decisions. Our brains are very capable of adapting, as we've talked about, and learning from our past. And so it's important to keep in mind that those psychological echoes from our past, or the ghosts from our past, are continuing to shape present decisions. One example that's kind of more tangible is, let's say someone grew up in a very poor or disadvantaged household growing up. The family struggled with money, didn't have the financial resources growing up, and so they had to barely get by as a child. Fast forward to an adult, say that a child that grew up in a financially insecure home environment. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's what a lot of people are facing, particularly now.
Right now, it's terrible. Right.
But let's say that one of those children grows up and is now found success and is now financially secure and has been able to acquire wealth, for example. They may still behave towards money in a way that would suggest they're financially insecure, even though they're financially well off. And it's that kind of ghost in the past of habits or their routine from their family of origin growing up that's impacting how they're interacting in the present.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You know,
Right.
There's also ghosts in relationships, right? Human beings, we're relational people, and
It's called baggage.
yeah, but
Relationship
baggage isn't a bad thing either, right?
right?
It just is.
Right.
You know, we bring baggage with us to vacation, and I don't think bringing baggage to vacation is a bad thing, right? When you lug our luggage around,
Right.
That's baggage, right?
Right.
In a physical sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we have to have it to go on vacation, I suppose.
Right.
You can't just go with the clothes off your back. Well, some people might.
Some people
But,
do. I mean, that's what a way to live, right?
Yeah. We all have relationship baggage of some way,
Right.
of some form or
Okay.
another. But that baggage certainly impacts our perception of relationships in the present that we have. So it's important to think about the ghosts in your relationships or the ghosts in my relationships. How have past relationships, whether it's good or bad, or how have even relational patterns influence how we interact with people now?
Yeah.
And it does play a role and an impact.
You know, I see that happen with a lot of people, that past experiences, they assume it's going to be the same even like in relationships, if you're meeting somebody new, like, my dates always end up bad, or people always end up ghosting me, or even when, or even if an employer is looking to hire somebody, well, we have a lot of people who people who apply don't show up to the interviews.
Right.
It's gonna continue happening.
Yep.
Well, that may have been true in the past, but you're talking about a new person each time someone
Right.
applies, or you're talking about a new person each time you go on a date or make a new friend or whatever. And I've always thought, well, you know what? It's in some ways it's probably protecting yourself from disappointment. But then also I think it's kind of not really giving the new person a fair shot,
Right.
at the job, at the application they're submitting, or them wanting to go on a date with you or something like that.
Yep. It's kind of like the statistical phenomenon of the it's called the confirmation bias. Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah.
And that's where you have an assumption, and then when we have an assumption about something, what we do is we subconsciously, without realizing it, we look for information in our environment that proves what our assumption is, and that's called the confirmation bias. And you can do that with anything. We can find any correlation to any assumption that we want, but the question then is the data you're gathering, is it actually telling you what you think it's telling you?
And you can really do that with anything. I don't want to go off on I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but like my little girls, my 7 and 5-year-old, suddenly their teacher was talking to them about 9/11.
Yeah.
And they're like, Daddy, I want to see the picture of the towers and what happened and all that stuff. And so I showed them. It was a very good educational, important session for them. But then, of course, you know me, I like going down rabbit holes. And so with 9/11, there are some pretty extraordinary rabbit holes.
There certainly are.
And you can find the numbers 9/11 in absolutely everything, confirming that I don't know, Bush planned the attacks and all that stuff, and here's all the facts.
Conspiracy,
it's a government conspiracy. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know, but it shows that whatever you're looking for, you're probably going to find it if you look the right way. If you look hard enough, or if you, anyone can twist information.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. Anything can manipulate data.
Right. Right.
So it's just interesting how we tend to do that, and we all tend to do that. And it's just important to keep in mind. But as far as ghosts in the relationships go, it's important to keep in mind that, again, we have good ghosts and bad ghosts in our past, certainly. But what's important to know is that unresolved issues, whether it's unresolved issues with parents, any exes that we've had, past mentors, past friendships, really any unresolved issues with past relationships will shape our current emotional interaction with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of times those unresolved issues, and the reason I focus on unresolved ones is because when something's unresolved, it means that we haven't taken the time to talk to the other person about it.
Right.
And what happens when we do that is we dehumanize the other person, and then it's very easy for us to make an assumption. So if you and I have a disagreement, for example, and I don't talk to you about it, and that's the case with any relationship. If I don't talk to the person with whom I have a disagreement about, your brain starts spinning and you make a lot of assumptions. And if that's never resolved, never put to bed, never closed, or never fully resolved with an endpoint, it shapes our current assumptions and emotional landscape and how we interact with others.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
So even though we may do all this work to change our perspective, to upgrade how we think about life, those unresolved issues in our past are still running in the background, kind of like the Polybius
Have you ever
code, for example.
Have you ever, like, in like reflecting on this stuff or whatever, and you come to find out like, oh, I never really made amends with something or from years ago or what have you, and like, you know, I need to get this off of my mind. I'm gonna reach out to that person, and say, hey, I know we haven't talked in years, but I'm really sorry I did that thing years ago. You know, are we good? Have you ever done something like that?
I have, yeah.
I actually did that once too. It was actually somebody I dated, like back in high school. Looking and how it ended, I always thought, man, that's the way I ended, or the way things ended was not good, and I felt really bad about it. And it was last year I reached out to the person and said, hey, you know what? I know I don't remember what I said, but you know, she has a wonderful family. I have a wonderful family. I said, hey, you know what? I just want to say, it's always been on my mind. We didn't really end things on good terms. I'm really sorry about that. You know, would you forgive me? And she's like, sure. I haven't even thought about this for forever, for decades.
I forgive you for adolescent immaturity.
Oh, right. Yeah, she's like, oh my gosh, we were just kids. And I was like, well, hey, you know, I had to get off my chest.
Yeah.
So it was awkward, but like, you know, I couldn't get it out of my mind. I had to get it out.
Yeah.
So,
and I think kind of relating to what you're saying is when those things kind of pop up, you know, you'll certainly have those flash memories that'll pop up and that you fully have to resolve. But it's really, what you're really talking about is, you know, how do you, if we really, let's be dramatic since we're talking about ghosts, is how do we exorcise the ghosts?
Yes.
The exorcism of the ghosts, right?
Indeed.
And one way to do that is to identify specific instances in which you feel you've wronged someone that you haven't resolved. And certainly you should go back and correct those. We should all do that, because that not only one frees you, but it also puts the issue to rest, right?
Right.
But the other thing you can do is look for patterns in your life. You know, if you keep facing the same problem over and over and over, maybe it's a ghost from your past that's influencing your choices now. And what I mean by ghosts, obviously, is maybe it's something, an experience you had, something you observed, something you were taught as a child, or that you went through from your past that's now influencing how you interact with somebody now. And so it's a good idea to look for those patterns and then identify them, and then kind of consider how that's influencing your current interactions with others. So it's important to ask ourselves, is this system, belief, or habit, is it actually serving me or not? You know, or am I just following it because it's always been there? You know, we tend to, a lot of times, engage in behaviors and interactions without really knowing why we're doing things. And the answer is, if we do things we don't understand why, the answer is typically, well, because this is how it's always been done. And we're creatures of habit, so it's very difficult to challenge this is how we've always done it belief, to kind of think about doing things a different way. But it's really important to identify, you know, is the way you're interacting with somebody, or is that pattern that you have, is it really serving you? You know, we both, I think we both, or all of us, know people in our lives that just keep facing the same difficulty over and over and over. but sometimes we never take the time to look at what pattern do we have and
why
what
are we having the
habits,
problem over and
what
over?
small micro decisions are we making on a daily basis that
Mhm.
is contributing to this problem that we're having. And as people, to get better, it's really important to look at that.
Do you think part of that, like, why does this always continue to happen to me? Do you think it's partially, I mean, probably, some of the ghosts in your past that need to be exercised, but do you think some of it has to do with the fact that you always say, this always happens to me? Do you think you kind of, do you think that kind of becomes like your body and your mind or whatever, your environment finds a way to match with what you're saying?
Yes, and I wouldn't say that's always true. First, I would say that kind of this always happens to me is very self-defeating, right?
Right.
Unless it's you get $1 million every day and say, "Oh, this always happens to me." That would be
Oh
great.
my gosh, I
Wouldn't
wouldn't
that be
mind
great?
that. Oh my gosh.
But typically, when we say
Shoot.
that, it's something bad has happened or unfortunate.
So why not say, hey, this always happens?
This always happens to me.
Why not say, that just gives me an idea. Why not always say, this always happens to me when something good happens?
Yeah.
Instead of this never happens to me. Why say that?
But the fact of the matter is, both good things and bad things always happen to us. And that's life. And I totally understand that some people have been dealt with a more challenging hand in life,
Right.
perhaps. So I'm not trying to minimize that. But the point I'm trying to make is life, it will be full of its ups and downs. And making statements like, it always happens to me, while it may be true, it certainly is rather self-defeating, subconsciously. So to answer your question, I think if you make the assumption that it's always happening to me, that's kind of an identity statement.
Yeah.
And when you start making identity statements like that, you tend to become what your identity statements are.
Right.
We tend to believe in that. And then when we believe in something, we go do it. So to your point, if someone says this always happens to me, and shocker it does, it's because they're subconsciously seeking out to have that happen to them to an extent.
I always learned that your subconscious mind can't take a joke. It takes whatever you say out loud, literally, like this always happens to me. Okay, well, the person who's your mind, you're telling your mind this bad stuff always happens, and so it's probably going to find a way or try to find a way to validate that claim because it doesn't think you're a liar, I guess. I mean,
right, exactly.
I mean, it's your own brain. I guess part of that has to, having that negative self-talk or just making those comments or it's kind of those the theory of, not theory, but you're developing neural pathways in your brain all the time.
Yep.
You got to figure out a way to break that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you break that? Personal strategies for kind of, I want to say letting go, but kind of changing your patterns. And number one, it's really important to think of
Maybe moving on.
Huh?
Maybe moving on from the ghost.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Is one is it's important to acknowledge where you are currently, but it's also important to kind of reflect back and look back on how did the past influence the pattern that I'm having now. So it's really important to recognize if you're being, quote, haunted by old fears, old patterns, or expectations. And maybe one, if it's a fear that you have that's manifesting itself, it's important to acknowledge that fear and identify why is that fear there. A lot of the fears we have are really baseless, and so it's important to acknowledge those. The challenge is it's very hard psychologically for us to want to give a lot of those things up, particularly our fears that's holding us back.
Interesting.
It's also important to recognize when you're being haunted by old patterns or habits. Patterns is another way of saying habit. So how are your old habits holding you back from what you want to accomplish in life, or your expectations? How are your old expectations of others impacting your personal life now? And the way for each of us to do this is different. I'm not going to sit here and prescribe a specific path for every individual. For some of us, it may be just rewriting the narrative, physically rewriting it. I have found that physically writing things down is one of the most awkward things to do, but it's also one of the most empowering things to do. And the reason for that is if we take like a fear, an irrational fear that we have, and that we acknowledge is there, and then actually take the time to write it down. As if we're writing it down on paper or typing it into a computer program and we read it, we kind of realize, at least for me, how ridiculous it is.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's been my experience, is when I actually write something down. For example, if I have an assumption about somebody, and I actually write that assumption down, so-and-so behaves this way because they think I'm an idiot or something, you know? When you read that, you're like, that is the most ridiculous, idiotic thing.
Am I really that self-centered? Am I really that self-focused on myself?
But that's what our brain does. Is our brain has this narrative inside that we run through over and over and over, and we all do it. And so sometimes getting it out is really freeing to kind of say, this is ridiculous, and I'm going to move on from this. Yeah, that's helpful for some people. The other idea is the other thing is introspection. What is introspection? Introspection is just thinking about thinking, right? It's thinking about how do you really process information, and how do you really interpret what's going on around you.
Yeesh, that'll be a deep think.
Yeah, it's a deep thing. Now we're getting into philosophy.
Wow. Yeah.
Sometimes, again, kind of tooting my own horn here, but therapy is really helpful for a lot of people. Counseling or therapy does not need to be something that is done because you're sick or because you have a disorder. A lot of times the people that get the most from therapy are those that don't, quote, need it from the outside looking in. But therapy can be a great way to kind of resolve or help you look at what in your past is impacting your present. And I don't mean to say that everything's related to our past, but for us to
it surely makes who we are today.
Yeah, if we don't acknowledge where we have been, then we don't have any context for the present. And that's very, very important to keep in mind.
Right.
And so a lot of times therapy isn't necessarily treating something that is wrong with you. A lot of times it's to help you get perspective and to help you get context to why you're acting this way or why you're thinking the way you're thinking.
Well, and you getting a therapist, you're talking with somebody who cares about you, but they're not emotionally involved, invested in you. They're not family, friends, completely.
Well, I would argue they are emotionally invested in you. Therapists aren't going to be there if they didn't care about people. Well, so I know what you're saying, but I just want to make sure I'm clear that therapists are very empathetic people. At least good ones are.
Super passionate, yeah.
And they're very good at, their job is to help you hold your emotional state in conscious awareness and help you process it. And so, but I get your point. They're not like intimately involved in your everyday life to the point that they're unbiased. Is what you're getting at.
Right. Yep. Yeah, they are emotionally involved, but they are unbiased.
Yep.
And they want they truly want what's best for you. They don't have any of your history. You don't have any history with them that's going to create bias.
Yep. Yeah. So therapy is a great way to kind of let go of the ghosts in your past. The other way that I jotted down is simply choosing to act differently. Now, simply acting differently is not going to apply to every situation. If I'm just going to say I'm just going to act differently, we're not really acknowledging the strength that our past has on us. But look at things like when you and I set goals for each other. When we have goals for ourselves, that is a conscious choice to act differently.
Right.
And so simply choosing to act differently another way could be said as goal setting, for example. And so it's not as simple as just saying, I'm going to do something different now, although sometimes that works. But it's kind of both and with all these things. Depends on the situation, what you're dealing with.
Right.
But really, when we get down to the most basic elements of addressing our psychological echoes or the ghosts in our past, is a ghost needs to be acknowledged. Sometimes they just need to be acknowledged before they can move on. And acknowledging the ghosts or acknowledging our psychological echoes is different for every one of us. And it's a different process for each person, depending upon what they've been through.
That's good. That's some good information.
Yeah. So, to kind of bring it back to the Polybius, just kind of like the way our code lives and our code is carried over, from
Yeah.
from computer to computer, the ghosts of our past do carry over as well.
Right.
And we all have ghosts in our lives or ghosts in our own machines, and they appear in work, they appear in our relationships, or even in our habits. So
Mhm.
the goal is to question it. And so what I want to leave the listeners with today is, what's haunting you that you haven't questioned yet?
Question everything.
Right.
Question.
We probably should have done this one closer to Halloween.
We probably should have. This is really a good one though.
So,
I would say, honestly, if people have more questions about this, I think they can just make a comment on the podcast or something,
Sure.
or reach out to you
yeah,
directly.
by all means, reach out to me directly. Yep.
And get your questions answered on that. This was very good. I think it could really be transformational for people.
Yeah.
If they apply it.
Right.
So
that's the biggest barrier, I think, for a lot of us, and myself included, is we have all this information and we kind of know what we need to do, but actually putting it into practice is the biggest hurdle that we all have.
I think because it's scary.
Right.
It's scary.
And it takes a lot of work.
It's scary. It takes a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
and it's uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And this year, I've been really focused on being okay with being uncomfortable again, because for so many years, I shouldn't say for so many years, the past several years, I've been really focused on what can I do to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not really a good place to be. My mantra has always been, be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I would the way I put it, and
just challenging yourself.
We're kind of going down another rabbit hole here, but maybe another podcast is, I don't try to look to be comfortable. I look to have peace.
Yeah.
And those are two very different things. You can still have peace if you're going through an uncomfortable situation or circumstance. Right. So for me, the goal is to find peace rather than finding comfort. Yeah. We all know the comfort culture has kind of
it feels a step back sometimes. It feels good, but does it really feel good?
In the moment, it does.
Yeah, in the moment it does, but you're usually filled with regret.
Yep.
So
yep.
Awesome. Well, this was really good. Thanks for coming up with all this stuff, Josh. I got nothing else. Okay. Do you have any parting words or anything?
What's haunting that you haven't questioned yet?
I got a few things.
And be careful if you go to the arcade. Polybius might still be there.
If you can find one.
Right.
Well, if you go to the old shopping malls, you might find one in there. Burnsville Mall. Burnsville Center.
Burnsville Mall.
Ooh, that might have some ghosts in there.
It might. It probably does.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Non-Static Podcast. If you'd like to stay connected and dive deeper into finding peace, focus, and fulfillment, be sure to sign up for Josh's newsletter, Non-Static newsletter at nonstatic.org. And always remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, we're here to help. Reach out to us anytime at Inspire Services or a more local therapy
mental health provider.
Mental health provider. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Josh. My tongues get tied a little bit there.
I can help you.
Yeah. Anyways, take care. Keep moving forward.
Enjoy the journey.